Yeah, I saw that. Oh my God. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all very much to this session, and I've been asked to give you a reminder that there'll be a bus leaving at 6:15 from St George's College, which is just down Hackett Drive across Stirling Highway and the building that looks like the medieval castle. It'll be leaving at 6:15 and heading off to our venue for this evening's entertainment. It's now my very great pleasure to introduce Dawn Hough. Dawn is Director at Pride in Diversity, Australia's first and only national not-for-profit employer support program for all aspects of GLBTI inclusion. In this session, Dawn will be discussing some of the unique challenges faced by LGBTI employees and students entering the workforce for the first time. She'll be discussing some of the progressive partnerships between universities and employers in an effort to alleviate some of the graduate fear around disclosure, and we'll look at top employers in LGBTI inclusion are doing to make a difference in this space. I know Dawn is well known to many of you as a colleague and friend. Welcome, Dawn.
Good afternoon and welcome. First of all, I would like to start by just paying my respects to the traditional owners of this land, elders past and present, and any Aboriginal people here today. I would also like to say it is wonderful to be presenting to a room full of diversity and equity practitioners or those with an interest in this space. I know certainly it can be a very lonely area of practice, and sometimes it can only be a part of our role when really we need 3 or 4 people in this role. And sometimes it can be extremely thankless work. Having worked in this area now for a while, typically within the corporate sector before moving into this role, I can certainly say that, even though it can be sometimes like a little diversity fatigue, hitting your head against a brick wall, but when you do actually, make a difference, when you do have those wins, then it's a great area in which to work. Just to give a little bit of context to this presentation, a little bit about who we are, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Pride in Diversity, as mentioned, is a not-for-profit employer support program. So where you have other not-for-profits in supporting employers in areas of perhaps gender or disability, we are the one that tackles the LGBTI inclusion space. But we have a number of roles. We do have a membership program which does provide employer support. But we also have the Australian Workplace Equality Index, or known often as the AWEI, or as some members are now starting to call it, the AWE, which is the first I heard of it, but we'll let that one go. The AWEI is the national benchmark on LGBTI inclusion, and I know many of the universities here today do participate in it. It is a free service offered by Pride in Diversity. There is no cost to it. You do not need to be a Pride in Diversity member to participate. So I do encourage all universities that are active in this space to have a go at it. It is a rigorous instrument, as those who do participate in it have found out, and it is extremely evidence-based. But what it will do is not only give you input and support to your strategy in this area, but it will also identify what is leading practice and what is current practice in Australia. And from your feedback results, for which there is great transparency, you will see where you're leading the pack, you will see where there's work that could be done, and you will be able to benchmark yourself, not only against different sectors, public sector, private sector, top employers, but also amongst your peers. I'd like to recognise that higher education has long time been a leader in this space. Not only in the area of your ally programs, but also in your contribution to research and much of the work that many universities have done to engage LGBTI staff members. If you look at the University of Western Australia, led the introduction of the ally program back in 2002. Now, keeping in mind this was before the Gay and Lesbian Reform Act was passed into WA Parliament. University of Queensland also played a leading role, implementing the second ally program in Australia following UWA's lead, and assisting a number of universities to develop their own ally programs, including UTS and University of New South Wales. Anne Stewart also conducted doctoral research on the way in which leadership was perceived to be enacted when a reform agenda is introduced around the inclusion of diverse sexualities and genders. We also know that Queensland University of Technology introduced an early ally-based program, and there are now 23 universities with like programs, with many more to be introduced. In our very first year of results of the AWEI, UWA, Curtin, Macquarie University, and UQ made the top 10 employer list, contributing to the largest industry group of higher education within the top 10 employers. Last year, 5 universities made it into the top 20 employers. But higher education is not alone. There are also some leaders in the private sector and also in the public sector. If you look at the private sector, IBM and Chevron, as mentioned in the earlier presentation today, are leaders. IBM started its diversity initiatives in 1914 with a resolution to hire as many people with a disability as possible, something that at that time was to be greatly applauded. In 1935, IBM employed women into technical roles on the same wages of men decades before it was required to do so, and in 1984 declared that they would not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, and started to implement initiatives around that. So there is an understanding out there, long-term, of why LGBTI inclusion is important. But even in this day and age now, there's a lot of ignorance. And I must say, in talking to a lot of the employers around why LGBTI has to be a pillar of your diversity and inclusion strategies, a lot of the responses that we get are quite alarming. We don't have enough gays and lesbians here to warrant this. Sexual orientation is a personal thing. It has nothing to do with the workplace. I had one CEO of a very prominent large financial services organisation come up to me in early days, very well-meaning, put his hand on my arm and said, "Well, I think it's very noble, dear, that you are working with these kind of people." This was 3 years ago. But at the end of the day, do we really want to encourage people like that to come and work for us? Now, you could get really angry at that. But do you know what? A lot of it is ignorance, because we have an invisible population. Because there are so many people that are too afraid to be who they are at work. We look around and we think there's not a lot of those type of people out there. And so what are people doing? They're relying on the stereotypes. They're terrified that if we do LGBTI inclusion in the workplace, we're actually going to start to see men running down corridors in black spandex waving rainbow flags, because that's their stereotype of what a gay person looks like. What do they call them? Mammals? Middle-aged men in latex? Or it should be lycra, I know. So, the stereotypes exist because of the invisibility of the population, and we can address all of these concerns, and often we do. We talk about why sexual orientation is a workplace issue and the fact that everybody has one, not just the gays and the lesbians. And we do talk about the fact that you don't see many people around your workplace that are comfortable in their own skin is possibly because it's not safe for them to do so. And in actual fact, when you get to know the gays and the lesbians, and I'm just focusing on the gays and the lesbians at the moment, but if you get to know the gays and the lesbians, they're just as boring sometimes as the rest of us. Make dinner at night, feed the dog, take the kids out, have dinner parties, but, Mardi Gras images are all the first to come to mind. One of the things, though, that I must say is starting to have an impact when we're talking to organisations is some of the research around invisible stigmatised identities. And there's a body of research around this, and it's a fascinating piece of literature to have a look at. The two areas that this research tends to focus on is predominantly those with mental health issues and those of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex groupings. For example, if I have mental health issues, then the social stigma around that might stop me from talking about it to family and friends, might stop me acknowledging that there are actually issues there, and might stop me seeking help. But likewise, the social stigma around being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, or whatever acronym you prefer to use is equally still there. A lot of people say in this day and age, are you sure about that? And I'd say absolutely. In fact, with heightened visibility of the fight for equality, there also becomes a heightened awareness of the anger and the hatred that's out there. And if you don't believe me, go and have a look at any comments on any newspaper blogs or websites where they're talking about anything same-sex. You will not only see, yes, a lot of support, but you'll also see the intensity of anger that's out there around that. The thought that we're even discussing this is abhorrent to people. Absolutely abhorrent to people. And all of those people have jobs. All of those people work in workplaces. And you see, the difficulty is, with the social stigma, is that just like you would not know someone is gay by looking at them. There's an interesting stat that Stonewall in the UK quotes quite a lot, that says, you're looking at about 8% of the population might fit your stereotype of what a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex person looks like, walks like, talks like. Your stereotype might be quite different to mine. That's 8%, that's not very much. But just like you don't know someone's gay by looking at them, the same goes by looking at you. I don't know what your religious, your conservative, your cultural views may be, that should you know that about me, it's going to change my relationship with you and how we work together. And this is why visibility is so important, because it's a risk otherwise, and it's a risk that many young people in particular are not prepared to take. So this is a really interesting body of research that talks about this invisible stigmatized identity, the stigmatized identity being LGBTI, the invisibility of it, meaning that if I can hide it from you, I will, because it's just not worth the risk otherwise. The difficulty, of course, is that if self is hidden, this body of research talks very much about it leading to identity centrality. Now, Dr. Sharman Hartel from the School of Business and Organisational Studies, professor there at University of Queensland, has done some great research on this, as have some academics that have since been around UWA and Curtin, for example, Raymond Trow. This research, what it's actually talking about is that if that part of myself is hidden on a day-to-day basis, I become acutely aware of every message around me that is telling me that I am absolutely right in hiding that part of myself. It's a little bit like if you are self-conscious about something, and I use the example, and I'm really glad I'm standing behind a podium now, because I use the example, what if I was really conscious of having enormous feet? Now, if I was really self-conscious of having enormous feet, I might go out of my way to hide my feet. And if I'm sitting at my desk working innocently away and there's a couple of people over there talking about and laughing about people with big feet, then I might fine-tune and hear and listen to and take that on board. And it's talking about having a heightened level of sensitivity to everything around you that is telling you you cannot be yourself at work because there is too much risk. And of course, all that does is reinforces the sense of exclusion, which again goes back into that need to hide self. Now, there are impacts not only for the individuals, but there are also impacts for organizations in that. And one of the reasons why this is becoming a particularly useful piece of research is that HR and people departments are very keen on things like employee engagement, productivity, team cohesion, culture, retention. These key levers can all feed into the need for people to be able to come in, put their head down, do their job, without having to expend enormous amounts of energy trying to be someone they're not, just to fit in. Stonewall in the UK, their Diversity Champions program, which is a sister program to Pride in Diversity, says that LGBT, or LGB, lesbian, gay, bisexual employees, their research was around lesbian, gay, bisexual employees that spent an enormous amount of energy hiding parts of themselves could be up to 30% less productive. Now we've got people's attention, particularly if they're in HR. or they're looking at performance metrics. So does that mean, well, easy, we don't hire only gays and lesbians because they're less productive? No, what it actually means is it's not the people that are less productive, it's your organizational culture that is making people less productive, because on a day-to-day basis they are having to self-edit conversations, not one-off, but on a day-to-day basis. Visibility is incredibly important for everything there that is telling me I can't be who I am. There needs to be the same level of messages telling you I can be who I am. Bev from UWA told me a really great story. In an interview room, she had one of our coasters, which is simply a homophobia-free zone, just a coffee cup coaster, in the interview room. And she had one interviewee who actually said to her, you know, I've never told anybody this before, but I can see that this is an inclusive place. I'm gay and this is a place that I could work. It was something along those lines. And it was just that visibility of a coaster. It's not that we're asking managers to, you know, pin a rainbow flag behind their desk or make an announcement once a month saying, hey team, if anyone's gay, I'm okay with that. What we are saying is that there are ways to be inclusive that will make an incredible difference. So LGBTI inclusion is certainly about balancing those messages. It says, if I was to look around your workplace, is there anything around me that is telling me it's okay to be me without me having to take that risk and come and tell you? Because otherwise it is a risk, and there are many, many stories of people actually taking that risk and having to suffer the impacts. But, you know, it's not only now what is seen as becoming a leading area of diversity and inclusion. Why? Because there are many, many organizations that will put their hands up and say, you know what, we live, breathe, dream, sleep diversity, but when it comes to this, don't want to know about it. We're a conservative organization, we're not ready for that. What, you're not ready to be inclusive? This is about balancing those messages. Where is the visibility that will tell people that it's okay to be who they are? Keeping in mind, though, it's not just about having that nice to have or that leading edge in the area of diversity and inclusion. There have recently been some federal amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, which now makes it unlawful through federal legislation to discriminate against anyone based on their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their gender expression, and their intersex status. One of the first countries in the world to tackle intersex status, and good on Australia for doing that. The difficulty, of course, and that also covers protections for relationship status, and again, gender expression. The difficulty, of course, for employers is that this is now becoming a compliance issue and a risk mitigation issue, because employers are responsible for the conduct of their employees, unless that they can show that they have actually taken reasonable steps to ensure this doesn't happen. And there, let me tell you, has to be a lot of education in this space. What is and what is not acceptable behavior? But people are fearful of offending others. Can I just make a note on that point? LGBTI inclusion is absolutely not about trying to change individuals' values, beliefs, cultural norms. Absolutely not. What it is about is acceptable workplace behavior. It is about what you will tolerate and what you will not tolerate in the behavior of others. It is about creating a visibly inclusive culture where people can come to work, put their head down, do their job, and do not need to fictionalize a persona just to go to work. I think Magda, in her coming out speech, I absolutely loved what she said. She said, I love, and keep on going a few more times, I love my job. But I shouldn't have to choose between who I am and what I do. I want to read you a few statements out of the employee survey, which is an optional part of the AWEI. And one of the beauties of this optional survey coming in through Pride and Diversity as part of your submission is that people do see it as an LGBT organisation, and there's a safety in that, and it's not going through, you know, your employer servers, and there's a perceived safety in that as well. But those who do complete optional surveys tend to be those who are either very, very supportive of initiatives or very against. And so you do see both sides of the coin. But I want to read you a couple of commentaries from this year's, or last year's, I should say, employee survey. This is a transgender employee talking about being able to be themselves at work. It would be totally unacceptable. I would no longer be able to work here, as I know I wouldn't be able to handle the mistreatment I would have to endure. I am already under medication just trying to deal with the hiding who I am just to make the people in my workplace feel comfortable. This is another employee, a gay woman, who decided that her employer was starting to talk about LGBTI inclusion and it would be safe for her to be out at work. And this was her comment. Stay out of people's lives and don't allow them to be happy and out for 3 years and then tell them to take anything gay from their room. And do not tell anyone they are gay anymore, and do not mention their female partner, and not have their female partner come into the workplace or have photos of my partner at work. It's easier to get the homo to change, it seems, than to re-educate the heterosexual person who may or may not have been offended. Another one, bullying is not addressed in some areas. And I know a number of women who have resigned because of the harassment and bullying. And one of the comments that really stays in my mind, these people shouldn't be allowed to live, let alone be given a job. But what next? Bestiality? And we think sometimes that we're in a safe space, particularly in higher education. Can I just say that all of those comments came from the higher education sector? One of the things that we found in the survey, which resonated both last year and this year, was around the fear of young people in what is a much more acceptable environment, and the fear of them going into the workplace. And Sheldon from Curtin gave a great presentation in the last session talking about what Curtin are doing with employers to tackle this. But there is a great real fear, and people are feeling like, well, okay, I'm out at university, but what do I do now when I go to work? I'm a new employee, I'm at the start of a new career. What kind of impact do I have to go back into the closet? And so we're trying to address that, and this year we are launching for the first time Australia's National LGBTI Recruitment Guide, which profiles a lot of the work that a lot of our members are doing, because we can hand on heart say that while not every organisation in this recruitment guide may put their hand up and say that they are best practice, you can know that we are very much working with these organisations in creating LGBTI inclusive cultures or assisting them in the initiatives, no matter how advanced or new in this particular area. And that university guide, or this guide, is being distributed to universities, to TAFE colleges, to queer collectives, to recruiters. And you can certainly, as a university, receive hard copies of that. It's made available to you free of charge, and it's also going to be online. And for those of you that are coming to our conference on Monday and Tuesday, you will receive copies of that. But there are also universities and organisations that are realising the same fear of young people going into workplaces. And as I mentioned, Sheldon spoke in the previous session about the unique relationship that both Sheldon and Curtin University enjoy to help put employers, inclusive employers, in contact with LGBTI employees and talk about some of the initiatives and provide networking opportunities. And I know that this partnership, we're seeing more and more university-led initiatives. We know, for example, that Curtin have recently looked at a mentoring initiative. I know also RMIT in Melbourne have got a fantastic LGBTI mentoring initiative as well. But findings are not just limited to young people. Even in these inclusive workplaces, and keep in mind our research is amongst inclusive workplaces, there are many employees that are still reported to be the target of continual gay jokes and sexual innuendo. It's funny, a statement that Bev made in our recent publication on a manager's guide to LGBTI inclusion was that LGBTI was often seen to be the last acceptable form of prejudice. And while we would call somebody up if they were making jokes around somebody being Indigenous continually, or somebody being from a different culture continually, or even being overweight, or some unique difference about them, it's still acceptable to make gay jokes and have constant innuendo. And let me tell you, that can chip away at somebody to the point that they just don't want to get out of bed and come to work the next day. And so we're finding that many of these employees that are participating in this survey are saying that they are still being the target of negative commentary and jokes and more serious bullying and harassment. It is clear that it's not enough to have inclusive policies or an allied program and an employee network. When we scratch below the surface, we start to see there's a wealth of information out there that will shed light on the need and importance of initiatives that impact cultural change. And while the AWEI does give an enormous amount of evidence-based measurement on what you are doing and what you can be doing, it's the survey that provides that lived day-to-day experiences of the employees that allows you to balance the two. And again, as mentioned, will give you an industry benchmark. One of the interesting findings that we did find this last year was to tackle the gender dimension of the LGBTI piece. And this was around lesbian, bi, and trans women. And what we actually found, while lesbian, bi, and trans women were fully supportive of inclusion initiatives in their workplace, backed them 100%, or certainly the ones that responded to our surveys, they didn't see themselves reflected. And so didn't participate in a lot of the initiatives. Supported them, but didn't participate in them. And some of the comments that we received is, I go to a networking event and it's all gay men or straight female allies. Where are the out females that can stand up proud and show us young lesbian, bi, trans women that it's okay to be who you are? And so that's another initiative that we are working on with what's called a Sapphire initiative at Pride and Diversity, and currently doing some research under UQ in that particular area and amongst our membership base. One thing that I will say, though, about women within LGBTI inclusion is, while we often hear it's hard enough to be a woman in the workplace, why would I put my hand up twice as a lesbian, bi, or trans woman? We do find that where people are out, there's an incredible amount of support and a need for mentoring and conversations around safety and impacts. And again, that's something that we're certainly trying to address through our Sapphire initiative. One thing that we can say, that consistently employees that were in the top 10 employers for LGBTI employees consistently fared better in terms of lived experience at work than non-top 10 employees. What this tells us is, not only is the index very much targeting the right kind of questions and evidence, but it does tell us that the more active you are in this space, the more chance you are to actually hit the very target audience that you're trying to reach. And that while some people will often say to us, aren't you doing more harm than good by calling out a group if you just want everybody to meld in and be like everybody else? We know that in diversity and inclusion it just doesn't work like that. And sometimes we do have to put a focus on initiatives, not to raise one group above another, but to bring a group up to the same level of privilege. And I think that's an incredibly important point. As mentioned, universities have ranked in the top 10 organisations over the last couple of years since we've started the index. It is a rigorous benchmark. It does provide you with strategy support, transparency, and an ability to see how you fare against other organisations. In the first year, higher education was the highest represented industry group, but as you can see, 2012 and 2013, our entry point in the top 10 has shifted significantly, and while universities are still doing some great work in this space, we're starting to see now that employers' score that got them into the top 10 3 years ago are now just getting them into the top 20. And so practice is shifting. And as practice shifts, expectations also will shift. To maintain leadership in this area, organisations really do need to build LGBT inclusion into their diversity and equity strategies. There does need to be visibility, and there does need to be ability to benchmark yourself against what is currently seemed best practice in Australia. Because practice has shifted so much this year, we have moved the index in a line with current best practice for workplace inclusion in comparison to Stonewall UK's Corporate Equality, Workplace Equality Index and the Human Rights Campaign Workplace Equality Index in the US, and also indices in Canada and also in Ireland. And so now our index has moved to a 200 point and we move to a top 20 employers, and it will now set the stage for us for the next 3 years. Practice has shifted that significantly. The beauty of this index is it gives much more flexibility for organisations from all sectors of all sizes. Once you've got the groundwork of the first couple of sections in place, it then allows you to have a look across the index of those areas that can impact LGBTI inclusion that would best fit in with your organisation. And so we will, on Idaho International Day Against Homophobia every year, provide awards for those employers that excel in the areas of LGBTI inclusion for that last calendar year, and it is year on year. But we will also shift that, of course, to a top 20 employers. Because of the number of universities participating, and we know that we've got several universities here that do participate in the index year on year, we have now included, as of last year, a highest ranking university award, as well as ranking for every employer that does participate, and incredibly transparent feedback. And it was great to see, for all the work that has been done across all the universities, that we were able to acknowledge the work of Curtin University last year as our highest ranking university in LGBTI inclusion. And of course we just love it when we see things like that, to promote that, which sends a real message of inclusion to all people. We have got, I believe, 5 minutes to take just 1 or 2 questions, in which case I will then hand over. But I will be at the event tonight. I do have to shoot back to Sydney tomorrow, but I will also be at the event tonight if anybody would like to ask questions there. Hi.
I've been watching your work for the last probably 4 or 5 years, and it's unmatched, unprecedented, really rigorous, and you've been probably the beacon that's really such a solid foundation and the highest impact I've seen. We are often pride the work we do. We've had our live program for about 3 years.
Yes.
And you've really, I guess, I've never seen a diversity inclusion program in my work that has made such a difference in the workplace.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to thank you for that. And just a really quick one too around some of our focus has been around taking a wider lens approach, not only about visibility and presence, but we find this work essential for everyone.
Yep.
Especially in terms of homophobic labelling and homophobia phobia.
Yeah. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
We've looked at Plummer's research and traits of masculinity and those things I think are really instrumental in a deeper understanding of the issues.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to say
Thank you. Thank you. No, we also, I must say, that within all of the LGBTI inclusion initiatives, the ones that make the greatest impact are those that are open to all employees, that actually it's not just a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender group, it's actually an organisational-wide inclusion initiative, and those that form part of those networks are all those that are supportive of LGBTI inclusion, not those who identify. And also, likewise, congratulate Deacon on, has made significant strides in the AWEI score over the 3 years. Has been one of our major long-term constant improvers in what you're doing. Been doing some fantastic work. One more question, and then I'll hand over before we close. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, and I would echo Roman's comments. Certainly those of us that have worked with Dawn over a long period of time are just amazed by the research and the insights that you bring and the wealth of knowledge that is useful for us as organisations. So thank you very much, and please accept this from the conference.
So can I just say that we do have some publications on the top 10 employers and brochures on the AWEI at the front if you do want one. Thank you.
I'm just waiting to see if our speakers appear. No, it's you. Interesting. Yeah, kind of like 2 to 3 hours, depending which time zone you're in. That's why, because I'm thinking.
Oh, right, yeah, no, Sal had chemo yesterday, so, yeah, so she wasn't able to today, but she's been texting with children, so yeah. Yes. Yeah, but I said, oh my God, yes, that's right.
That's right.
Good outcome.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're living longer,
Yeah, that's right.
doing all that sort of stuff, so shall we just start?
I think so, yeah,
Okay.
let's get everybody on.
Okay, everybody, we're going to start. Although we have listed Sally Webster and Amanda as speakers, Amanda is doing a solo performance this afternoon. And what a lovely segue. We had Sheldon earlier and then Dawn, and now we've got Amanda from Curtin, well, speaking about Curtin's program. And so we've gone from the career transition for students to the global, and now we're going to be talking about responsibility and accountability at the senior levels for the kinds of strategies that we'd like to see happening across our universities. So I'd like you to welcome Amanda Willis to the podium, please.
Thanks, everybody. In opening, I'd like to pay respects to the Indigenous owners of this land and elders and Indigenous people past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm giving this paper on behalf of Sally Webster, my colleague, who couldn't be with us today. She underwent chemotherapy yesterday, so she wasn't up for it today, but I understand she's been texting with Sheldon, so she's definitely present with us in one way or another. In fact, she usually emails or calls with a list of 10 things we have to do, and we all jump. So this is Sally's presentation, and it's not nearly as interesting as Sheldon's work that he's presented, or as inspiring, I think, as Dawn's. It's more the dry, how do you bring about these kind of changes in an organisation from an organisational change perspective. But certainly developing a strategy in this space was some of the feedback that we received from our participation in the AWEI, and it's probably worthwhile sharing the journey that we've been on. Oops, I've gone backwards. Done that. Okay. Right, that's better. I guess it's important to understand that this is really the culmination of about a 7-year journey, and I'd like to acknowledge Sonia Braidner, who's in the audience here, who really shone the spotlight on our performance or non-performance in this space when she was working at Curtin, and we hope we've come a fair way since. Talking a bit about the importance of benchmarking, as Dawn was talking about, and our journey through, I suppose, understanding the complexities in relation to the LGBTI space, for starters, just the terminology, and looking in particularly at issues that are experienced by LGBTI people, both in the workplace but also in the community, looking at how that fitted then within our broader equity agenda and our planning framework, to the journey of actually having a specific diverse sexuality and gender identity inclusion in place. So as you'd be aware, we have, I don't know why it's done that. Okay. So as you can see, this is not my presentation. Been acknowledged in a number of awards, firstly through Pride and Diversity in relation to the Workplace Equality Index, with rankings in 2011 just outside the rankings in 2012, and then in 2013 within the top 10 employers, and also the highest ranked university, and also runner-up in relation to Ally Program and Sheldon as GLBTI champion. We were also acknowledged as a finalist in the Australian HR Awards, and I think that's significant, that there's recognition not just within the equity space but within the broader HR space at all, and that's something that is always impressed upon me when I hear Dawn speak. This is about good HR management, and that's really important. So that's a photo there of Michelle receiving the award, and she rang me just after that and she said, "I am so proud. I'm so proud to work at Curtin," which was fantastic. And you can see the various categories there. Curtin acknowledged this achievement. It was really proud of its work in this space, and I think it's really important to say that Curtin sees its inclusion of LGBTI people as part of its reputation. It is a reputational issue, along with all the other reputational issues such as research, excellent teaching, and the things that make up a top university. And so it was out there in the media talking about what it's been doing in this space. So the first thing we had to do was get our head around the terminology. What exactly was it that we were dealing with in terms of the complexity in this space, understanding the difference between biological sex, gender identity and sexuality. Also in relation to what did the LGBTI mean, and all of the complexities around that. And the difference between orientation and identity, and how people manifested that and preferred to represent themselves. This, I think, has been really well represented in the genderbread person image. This is an image that's available from the Freedom Centre, and I think what's really interesting about it is it represents these different concepts as a series of continua. And I think that's important in terms of not sticking people into further pigeonholes on top of the pigeonhole in which they often find themselves stuck. So once we'd understood that, we went to the research. Being a university, it's always important to look at what the research tells us, and it was really shocking to understand the kinds of experiences that people have, from verbal abuse through violence, discrimination, and what this can lead to: self-harm, depression, suicide. And it goes on. In terms of discrimination, the prevalence of negative experiences of LGBTI people, the particular focus that people, transgender people, appear to feel, and abuse and assault, both verbal and physical. Certainly there's no dearth of study in this area, but all of the findings are depressingly similar. Dawn has talked about the effect of this, and it's important to understand, I guess, that the experience of depression and suicide is not a factor of being LGBTI. It's a factor of experiencing the behaviours which are resulting from other people's reaction to that. So both suicide and attempted suicide. So we were very clear in terms of the development of a strategy that one of the things we needed to address was homophobia and the effects of homophobia. And to do that, we wanted to look at whether or not there was any difference between a university and environment and the community in general. I guess a lot of us would like to hope that being part of a community of learning, perhaps people are more enlightened or more educated. And so we looked at some work that had been done here at UWA in terms of the Rainbow Project. I suppose the results were not dissimilar from the community, but there was at least a feeling that perhaps perceptions were generally more favourable, although a number of the attitudes found in society were represented. But it was clear that those with a good knowledge of LGBTI people tended to have more positive attitudes to non-heterosexual people. We also wanted to address the notion of privilege. Many of you working in the cultural space will be aware of the concept of white privilege. We wanted to address the concept of privilege in this space. So recognising that we have in society a dominant paradigm, which is heterosexual. And if you come from outside of that paradigm, there are certain things that go with not being, if you like, in the in-group. If you're from within the in-group, there are certain things that come with that, many of which are not even recognised. So an assumption that the dominant way is best. The luxury of ignorance, that you don't know what you don't know, but you never need to know.